Today we will be exploring woodworking tricks for 3D printing. It all started when I was browsing Reddit and saw this cool video, where this Chinese guy was making cool looking woodworking joints. I actually love watching woodworking videos. Sometimes you even see woodworkers use 3D printing to help them. Hey, that's pretty cool. Maybe I could use same techniques for 3D printing. So in this video I want to focus on miter joints and doing cool looking patterns with multicolor printing. I came up with this simple plan that starts with making a prototype. The prototype will hopefully be turned into a cube, and I will explore the Kumiko patterns with multicolor printing. And in the end I will try to make a cool product using these techniques. So let's get to work and start the design process. Some of you might think this is such a stupid idea, but is it really? Watch this video and comment below if it's stupid or not. Anyway, I made a quick sketch that took around 15 minutes to make, and then printed out some prototypes. So I first printed up this big prototype. Printing a big joint is pretty easy, but for my needs I need a smaller joint. Naturally, doing big joints with 3D printing is no issue, but for my design I needed smaller joints. I figured out around 8mm might be the smallest joint that I can make. I tried to make the tolerances as tight as possible, so I wouldn't have to use glue for the joints. This early prototyping did not yet reveal all the problems I would face later. When I started this design, I thought it was going to be pretty easy to make a storage box with these joints, but it's actually pretty hard. It took quite many tries to get the perfect version of these. After the first prototypes were done, I expanded the joint design further to make a cube shape. The perfect fit did not equal perfect parts. When I designed the rest of the joint, I had to use supports for printing, and that caused some issues with the print quality. The parts did not fit perfectly anymore, and there were these annoying gaps between the joints. And one of the biggest issues that I could not quite get the consistent quality with these joints. So I decided to try to modify the joints so I could print the models with consistent quality. And this is what I came up with. My new parts can be printed without using supports. Here you can see the difference between my design and the original design. I think both are okay, and even my design could be improved much further. After the cube design was locked in, it was time to move on to make the Kumiko patterns for the cube. There are so many different Kumiko patterns that you could use, and I just chose the patterns that were most pleasing for my eye. The flower design and the sci-fi design. They might have some other proper names, but that's what I call them, the flower pattern and the sci-fi pattern. And this was actually pretty interesting to do. So far I have done very little work with the multicolor printing, so I had to do some testing to see how I could achieve the best quality with the multicolor printing. It quickly became obvious that there are some limitations with the multicolor printing. I first tried to print patterns that were too small. From my tests, I learned that around 1mm gap is the smallest that I can print with the good quality. Any lower than that and the results might not be so good. Another thing that I tested out multiple times was using ironing. Sometimes you could get really nice print finish with the ironing, but that was not always the case. I had some quality issues with both ironing big parts and small parts, but the overall quality seemed to be decent. And without the ironing, the small parts would have this nasty texture. I guess I shouldn't call it nasty, maybe some people will like this texture. So for the multicolor printing there was no conclusive results. I think I prefer the ironing on the smaller parts and not ironing the bigger parts, as you will see later on the video. I guess the key takeaway was just don't do too small of a pattern. When I was designing the pattern for the box, I also did some research on what kind of patterns are the woodworkers doing on YouTube, and I found out some cool videos. For example, I really love this design from Johnny Builds. Makes also has some cool designs. And naturally, I don't want to copy these creators. I just want to find out some ideas for what would work for a storage box. With these ideas in mind, I went back to finishing up the prototypes. So the next part of the project was to assemble the cubes with the Kumiko pattern walls. One of the reasons why I decided to make these cubes was to use them as a design reference in the future. One of the regrets that I do in designing is not documenting the design well enough. There are several times where I had to design the same model again since I didn't document the first model properly. So I hope these cubes will remind myself of not being lazy with the documentation. Assembling these cubes is pretty simple. It's all 3D printed parts and they click in place quite easily. And I think the joints will be strong enough even without the glue for my purposes. And I might as well show you how strong these joints are. They can easily hold a force of 12 kilograms. And the friction of the joint is strong enough to hold a 12 kilogram weight with the string. Okay, I might have been a bit too hopeful with the strength of these joints. In hindsight, it was obvious that the box joints would not be able to hold a 12 kilogram weight. But trust me, the joints are still pretty solid. Okay, maybe not. Then it was oh my god. Then it was time to finish up the box design. So I designed a basic storage box using the knowledge I gained from my multicolor printing experiments. I think I don't like the look of this lid. Something feels off about this design. The ironing gives a nice flat surface, but the quality is pretty bad. You can clearly see some markings on the print that the ironing left. And another thing that I don't like are these sharp corners. The back of the lid also came up pretty horrible. I had to use some supports to make the lid and it shows in the quality. I guess it's back to the drawing board. Maybe I can make a better print. For the new version I removed the magnets and improved the design so it can be printed without supports. I also chose not to use ironing and the end results came out pretty good. What do you think? Which design is better? Now I can finally assemble the box. One of the reasons why I wanted to start this project was to improve the printing efficiency. The difference between printing multicolor parts horizontally or vertically is pretty huge, at least several hours. And the waste in filament is also pretty significant. Naturally, there would be multiple different ways you could make this kind of box with 3D printing, but part of the fun for me is to explore new ideas and designs. For the first box I used the custom miter joints I designed before. There still are some small gaps between the joints and the bottom panel moves slightly, so the design is not perfect. The assembly process was pretty straightforward. The parts click in place easily and in the end you see this nice looking box. The quality of the box is pretty good, but still not the level where I would be 100% happy. For the second box I made yet another version of the miter joints. The joints had to be printed with supports, so I had to use the clippers to do some cleanup with the parts. The end result is a bit better than the first box, but there is not really a huge difference. There were still small gaps between the joints, but overall look of the box is a bit nicer, to my eyes at least. Then I made a couple of other storage solutions in the normal 3D printing way. A case for bearings where you can see and check the measurements of the bearings. This case can hold up to 11 bearings. And after that I made another case for my magnets. The magnet case can hold up to 3 different sized magnets in a case that locks in place using a quick lock mechanism, and I will explore this design in the future videos. So the end result came out pretty nice. I'm not actually sure if I want to use these joints in future projects. If I could improve the design, I would still probably use them. So this is how the boxes turned out. That's it for now. Bye!